Good day from eBizRadio.com, the place to go if you want to know about the world of business and the business of the world. I'm Nick von Stein. We're continuing our podcast series with Atvance Intellect, and I've got Quinton Senekal with me today. Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, and you, Nick. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. You're a solutions architect, so we're going to unpack that as well as what you do in Atvance. But mainly our topic today is about data analytics. And as an introduction, I'd just like to say that many companies can go out and collect data, and then they suddenly realize that they're completely overwhelmed by this data because there's so much of it, and they don't know what to do with it. And really, that's where you come in, Atvance Intellect, I should say. So let's talk a little bit about this topic because it's quite fascinating how you guys mold and shape the data into something that's actually usable. So just talk to us a little bit about your role in the company and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a solution architect. So we deal mainly with Splunk as a technology. So we've decided to partner with Splunk with regards to their offerings and their platform. From a title perspective, solution architect, it's very broad. Like I said, we deal mainly with Splunk, so I work mainly on Splunk from a day-to-day basis. We are also an AWS partner, so I also deal with building up AWS infrastructure, being certified in that space.
Just to jump in there, AWS is Amazon Web Services.
Yeah, Amazon Web Services. Yeah. So we have a current offering running on there that we offer to some of our smaller customers. So I'm responsible for making sure that stays up and running. Obviously, it's Splunk built on top of AWS. So that's pretty much what my role and what my position entails.
Just before we move on, can you just quickly explain to those that don't know what Splunk is?
I'd be very concerned if someone doesn't know what Splunk is at this point, but so essentially it's just a data analytics platform. Essentially, a competitor to the likes of Elastic Stack from an open source perspective, or your traditional SIEM environments that are running within the industry at the moment. IBM QRadar, there's quite a lot of them out there, that type of thing. But Splunk. What makes Splunk different, and the reason that we decided to partner with them, is that they are. It is essentially a data everything platform, right? So they're not focused on a particular vertical when it comes to the offering. So they don't do just a SIEM from a security perspective, or just BI data, which you have in quite a lot of the other techs. Splunk is one platform that can handle all of the verticals, being unstructured or structured data, and it can do it really well. So when we decided, what platform we would be using and offering to our customers, it was a no-brainer that we would use Splunk.
So let's talk a little bit about data analytics. I said at the intro that a lot of companies try to DIY this entire thing. They go and they collect this massive amount of data, they get overwhelmed, and then the project ends because they don't know what to do with it. And you obviously, and Splunk, this is where you guys come in.
Correct. Yeah. So I think the as you mentioned, there's a lot of approaches out there to how the organizations deal with their data. The standard approach is to find a piece of tech that allows them to collect their data and then throw everything at it. And as you mentioned, it then becomes this big beast that overwhelms you. You're collecting terabytes and terabytes of data, but nobody really understands the context of that data, and nobody really understands how to turn it into some form of actionable intelligence. And that, I think, that's the key factor in making something, making any data strategy a success is having the context and understanding what the story is you want to tell out of that data. Otherwise, at the end of the day, it's just a huge amount of data sitting in a central repository somewhere, and nobody really understands why it's there or how to use it.
Okay, so two things with that. One, what's the actual process of making something actionable? And then number two, how have these processes developed over time? Because there obviously has to be a system that makes sure that the models that you're coming up with are valid.
Yeah. So I mean, talking to the first point, I mean, the big key around understanding what you want to do with your data is understanding the story that you want to tell. So a lot of the organizations that we've spoken to over the last couple of years, they understand that there's value in analyzing the data that they have coming from all parts of their business. But they struggle to put that story together, and that story, I mean, it could really be whatever you're looking for, out of your data, depending on the data you're collecting or the part of your business that you're looking at. You need to understand what is the context, first of all. So that's the most important part. So what is the story you're trying to tell with this data, and what action comes out of that story? And that's the first part. That comes way before you even start collecting your data, because that story and the action that you want to produce out of that story is going to determine what you need to collect and how much you need to collect and from where. And I think that's, as I mentioned earlier on, that's where the penny drops for most customers, is that they are already collecting their data, or they're planning to collect their data, but the story isn't there. And it could be multiple stories. I mean, we consider them from our perspective as a use case. So when we talk to customers around wanting to start their data journey, or customers that are already well into their data journey and collecting a lot of data, it's always a case of what is the use case? Tell me what you are looking to gain and what value you want to bring out of that data, and that use case will determine how we deal with the data, which parts of the data we use, and then we build out that story once we've got that.
Now, over at Atvance Intellect, you service a number of different companies of varying sizes, and I imagine it really is on a case-by-case basis, because some of them are small SMEs, some of them are corporates. It really runs the gauntlet. Yeah, we do. So we have quite a number of very large customers that we're dealing with in the financial space. We have, and it, as you mentioned, it ranges from very very large implementations where we are doing terabytes of data per day, to very small customers where we are doing maybe less than 100 meg a day. And every single customer that we walk into, the context is different. The story is different, right? So ranging from a customer that wants to see, taking an example of one of the customers we have, is looking at sugarcane deliveries across the country. That's pure BI data, pure structured data, and we've managed to help them to put that data into an actionable format, where they are actually addressing that data through a mobile app that they've written, which connects to the Splunk environment. It pulls the data out, and all their growers and their mills around the country are able to see their data in real time using this app. Just to jump in there and run with that. You gave the sugarcane as an example. Just to give some people an idea of how the data can be used in an actionable sense, I assume that it helps with their supply chains, with logistics, with distribution, which in turn affects your bottom line.
Correct. And this is something that most companies that we talk to, the data is already there, but I would say probably 90% of them are dealing with Excel spreadsheets. It's a massive amount of data. Existence. If we look at, from a spreadsheet perspective, it's massive. But if you look at ingesting that data into some form of analytics platform like a Splunk or any others, the data is fairly small, from an ingestion perspective. But the idea is to have them use that data in a real-time fashion where they can understand that. So go back to the sugarcane example. So I'm a grower, or I'm a mill that sits somewhere in that supply chain, and I want to understand in real time How much am I delivering? What are my tons delivered, on a weekly basis? How does that help me to understand and to try and make the processes around that more efficient? And yes, like you mentioned, at the end of the day, it's all about turning that data into something actionable that gives you some value, whether it's a saving or whether it's additional revenue. Is up to the story that you are telling.
Now, you were talking about the story, and that's the really interesting part, because it really informs on the action that you guys then implement. An example being, like you were saying, the sugarcane. There, it's not about increasing revenue, it's about streamlining your supply chain. In other examples, it's going to be about increasing your sales. Maybe, for instance, you're struggling with to generate new sales amongst millennials. So you can go and find some actionable data that you can then go and throw at the millennial demographic, just to give an example.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, if you look at a really simple example of using data, and I mean, it is very, very simple. But if you look at a part of your business where you are potentially you're a manufacturing business and you're selling a product, whatever that product would be. Generally, what we find with customers is that there would be quite a lot of work done to track sales, right? So the sales figures would be fairly good and fairly accurate, and the guys would be tracking those sales figures. But when you move down that chain and you get to the side where they're producing their product, the data coming from the actual production line is not being correlated with the sales data. So they might have data in the production line where they're measuring the amount of units produced, that type of thing, but that data is not being correlated, right? So and that's what we help our customers with, is when you start actually correlating the data from the different silos within the business, you start seeing a different picture, right? So you can now go and say, I'm tracking the sales figures. And let's say, for instance, my sales figures, for whatever reason, they start to massively spike for whatever reason. Maybe I've released a new product, or I've made a change to a current product, and my sales are spiking on that particular product. Now you start to correlate that data, and you start seeing, okay, well, my sales are starting to increase, so my production needs to increase, in line with those sales. Otherwise, I'm going to run to a point where I can't sell my product because I can't produce it quick enough, right?
That's very, very interesting. Something else I wanted to ask you: what about people that have no knowledge or no interaction with data? We all know it's out there. It's this concept in the cloud, but then someone comes to you and says, "Okay, help me with this whole journey." Are you able to do that?
Well, look, so I think the answer to that would be is that you don't need to be a data scientist to get value out of your data, right? I think that's the key, and I think that's something that we help most organizations understand, is that it depends on the context of the data, right? If you are, again, coming back to the simple example that I mentioned earlier on, if you are someone in the sales department, you are not a data scientist. You may be the sales manager or just a salesperson, but you understand what the context is of your business and what the data is that you're generating, right? So you've got sales figures, you've got quarterly figures, you know that data as well or better than anybody else will, right? So I think the answer there is probably, guys believe that doing this data analysis and doing all these fancy things around AI and predictive analytics and all these things that are being thrown around as buzzwords, you don't need to get to that level of maturity to get value out of your data. And that's what we help our customers to understand.
Yeah, I think people get scared.
Exactly.
It's for many people, it's an entirely new thing, especially if you're in your 40s, 50s, or older. And even if you're younger, I've had friends who've gone and done some data analytics on their young budding businesses, and they've almost had to go and have the data education separately, or because they need to just understand the context of data itself. And I think that's one of the things we lack in South Africa, is the knowledge on data is so fear-driven.
Yeah, agreed. And this is also, I mean, this is also one of the reasons that we decided to partner with Splunk, because it is probably out of the products that are out there, it is probably the most intuitive and easy to use product when it comes to not the not the back end portion of it where we are ingesting the data, but the actual analyzing of the data and actually, getting some value out of it. It's quite quickly to, quite quick to get up to speed with how to use the platform, and it's not. Again, I mean, you don't need to know, very complicated algorithms and these types of things that go with data science to be able to start showing some, value and start seeing some of the answers that you're looking for out of the data that you have.
You guys at Atvance Intellect and your clients, you obviously are taking all this data, you're working it, you're using it to come up with actionable solutions. How do you guys determine how successful those actions have been?
Well, it's different. It's different for every customer that we go into. So as mentioned before, so every customer, I don't think we've actually, in the time that we have been up and running, or we haven't been to a customer where we've told the same story, more than once. I think the ROI, and calculating it, it's not a simple thing to do. It becomes quite complicated, especially when you are dealing with, when you're dealing with BI data, for instance, in sales or products or stuff like that.
Just one thing. What do you mean by BI?
So business intelligence data. Okay. So I'm talking about outside of the IT space. So something that's in a structured format where you are looking at sales or marketing or that type of stuff that falls outside of the IT space. If customers that are dealing with that type of data, the ROI becomes, I wouldn't say easy, but it becomes simpler to calculate that and to quantify what that means at the end of the day. Majority of our customers at the moment are IT IT data related. So we're talking about unstructured data, just standard logs coming out of your IT environment. That the ROI there is determined by how quickly can I respond to a security incident in my environment, right? How many incidents can I, how can I increase the number of incidents that my security team can respond to, within a 24-hour period. So it's different. It's different in every story. So I mean, there's not one shoe size that fits all when it comes to the data that you're working with.
Now, I've avoided the COVID word as much as I can, but I have to bring it up at some point, considering it's a reality we're going to be living through to 2021 at some point. Just from your specific area of Atvance Intellect, do you think you guys will see a big impact of coronavirus in your data collecting abilities, or also in the actual data itself?
So from a data collecting, from the abilities perspective, no, right? So, one thing I think we've been lucky with is that our strategy for our company from the beginning has been to do remote work. So we've always worked from home. All of our techies and all of our management, follows the same approach. So it's pretty much been business as usual for us over this period, which has been great because I think we've set ourselves up to have at least the least impact that we can have. Our customers currently are struggling, and they're not struggling from a data perspective, struggling from a process perspective, because they've been thrown into situations where they all need to work from home, and they're not really geared up for that.
Yeah, it's not business as usual, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. So, from with the type of data, yes, we have seen quite a big shift in and particularly in the story that our customers are looking for, right? And what has happened is that previously especially our large corporates would have, offices full of people, and they'd have maybe a couple of hundred people working remotely on a VPN at any given time. What's happened now is that paradigm has shifted completely. So now you have, the majority of the workforce working on VPN and connecting remotely, and you have a couple of, maybe one or two people in the office. So our customers' requirements have changed from a data perspective. So they're now looking for, how do I monitor my VPN connections? How do I monitor what my guys are doing at home? How do I see the activity? Some customers are struggling with the bandwidth on their VPN solutions because they never really catered for the amount of people connecting to it at the moment. So we are starting to see some different discussions happening, not necessarily with how we collect the data or where we collect it from, but actually what we are collecting, and how does that story differ from what you wanted to see before the corona pandemic hit.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to the conversation in closing?
No, all good. I think what I would like to add at the end is that the idea for us around Atvance Intellect is to get our customers to understand that a data strategy doesn't have to be a 20 million rand investment, and a huge team running it. The idea for us is to get our customers to buy into the fact that you can start really small, right? You can start with, you can start doing one story with potentially one piece of data or one subset of data, and then build the value out of that small piece before you start to move on, and increase your investment and increase the level of uptake in your organization. And I think it's working really well with the customers that we've engaged with so far, and I think people are starting to buy into that.
Quinton Senekal from Atvance Intellect, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.